Hey, everybody, welcome to Tapped In Indy Wrestling on this date, March the 28th, 2024. I'm your host, Heath Mulligan, joined by the man behind the controls, the man behind the power, the man behind the curtain, Nick McDaniel. Nick, how are you today, my brother?
I'm good, man. This doing it every 2 weeks, man. It's piling up the notes. So we were joking about, are we going to have to go to this thing weekly, to
Yes.
keep it, to keep us, from overloading us in 1 week, man. That's crazy.
It's almost as if we started this show and then the news grew exponentially and all this stuff started happening. And fans, the only way to stay on top of things, you got to go on YouTube, you got to subscribe, you got to like, and you got to hit that bell. You got to turn on your notifications so that every time an episode is dropped, that you are the first to find out about it, because you never know what we're going to be talking about. We've got some things in the works for like special episodes, some special things. And hey, let's just say you're on the run, you don't want to watch the video. Obviously, all the podcast apps, everywhere you can listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. There is no excuse. We are everywhere that you can watch or listen, because we want to change the world for independent wrestling. And speaking of change, I'm really excited because as we've been going along, you fans know this is a work in progress, but we've got some different segments now, and I'm really excited. And we're going to jump right in with the Indy Rewind. Zip, zip, zip. Sorry, that was a personal sound effect. The last 2 weeks, there has been a ton of wrestling in the Carolinas and Georgia. Let's go back 2 weeks ago. Nick, you guys were at Anarchy down there in Monroe, Georgia, in what, spoiler alert, turned out to be the last Anarchy show there in Monroe. What was your night like down there?
Very solid card. You could see them building some things that they're working on. Like I said, the main event, Jeter, Nick Halen, done really well. Very solid card, top to bottom. But listen, and I say this about typically WWE, AEW, most cards are built are revolving around one big story, and the big story at Anarchy was the tensions between Commissioner Michael O'Rourke, David Manders, kind of what was going on there, and we kind of got the blow off there, and I think that transitioned into what we're going to talk about here in a minute. That okay, they've put that to rest. The owner and David Manders are now kind of on the same page, and shook hands and hey, everything's good. And so that, like I said, I felt like it was a turning of the page, starting the new stories and heading into that new direction. So at Anarchy, so
And the announcement Saturday night that Anarchy is moving to the Royston Dome in Georgia. I'm going to tell you, I could have made a list of 100 announcements that were going to be made in Georgia wrestling this weekend. That would not have been one of them.
I listen. I appreciate. I just look at my whole take on it. It's more. It's just, the issue I have with it. Let me start there. It's like
Right.
there's always two sides to every coin, and the part that I
Right.
love, Anarchy has a home.
Yes, 100%.
Anarchy's gonna be. I believe they posted. They posted out a picture June. It looks like they're going to start in June.
Right.
What their schedule is going to be beyond that, I don't know. I know of a show that will run. It's not my place to make that announcement, so I'm going to let somebody else make that. But I've always said it a challenge. There's 3 promotions now going to be running out of that building. I know, like, there are promoters that I always talk to that are like, hey, I'm not running. There's a promote. Look, I'll go ahead and say, so, like, Gary Lamb, I ran a show in his building. He allowed that to happen.
Right.
But it was like, hey, because it specifically was like, this is a one off. That's why I'll let this happen. There are scenarios where it'll have, but hey, you can't run here regularly. This can't be a thing because
Right.
it dilutes it down. That's my concern. That's really my only concern with it is if SCA is going to run every Friday, The Outlaw show, is it every week? I can't. Sunday. I mean, it looked like it's weekly, but if it's, let's say
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
bi-weekly, monthly, even still, then you're going to put Anarchy in. If Anarchy goes to monthly or bi-monthly, that's a lot of, discretionary income chewed up in a
Right.
window, and it's like people are going to have to make decisions. Now, here's the funny part. I don't know that Anarchy's the one that has to worry about it.
Right.
Does it
Right.
hurt SCA? Um, you know, I think SCA and George Outlaw's got to worry probably more than Anarchy potentially.
Yes. Here's the thing. If I'm, and I mean no disrespect by what I'm about to say, if I'm a fan and I've been going every Friday night to Square Circle Action Wrestling, even back to APW, and I love those guys, and I'm a fan, and I love the storylines, and I know what I'm going to get, and then I go to an Anarchy show, and there's different talent, maybe better talent, and then now I got to make a decision. And if I can see the same guys from Friday, if they're working that Sunday show, which there's I don't know if everybody knows this. There's a lot of overlap on talent in
Yeah,
Georgia wrestling right now. And so which one of those three promotions is going to be different than, better than, you know? That's the big question. And I'll have a lot more to say about that later on. But that was a huge announcement.
yeah,
And really my shock to it wasn't that it was at the Royston. I just wasn't, that wasn't on my radar that announcement was coming.
yeah. I honestly felt like for some reason I just honestly felt like they were just gonna stay in Monroe. I did.
Right.
So clearly I was wrong, but that's just kind of the vibe that I felt like would that fit them the best at the time. I thought, but I obviously was wrong.
Yeah. I was at 3 Count Pro Wrestling that same night in Anderson, South Carolina. Really good show. It was a fundraiser for, I think, the wrestling team. They were very happy with the crowd. It was a good, solid show. What I refer to more of a house show feel, like a few storylines, but no title changes, nothing like that. Drew Adler and Chase Emery had a great main event. Like I said, just a good, solid show. And I want to give a shout out to all the great guys at 3 Count for their hospitality and just making me feel welcome. It was good to be back. This past weekend, 2 shows on Saturday night: Disruptor, which you were at, and the Mason Andrews Appreciation Show. Nick, Disruptor looked like they knocked it out of the park again.
Yeah, so it was another really good show. Only one match where it felt like it lulled just for a second. But here's the thing. So they started about a half an hour late, and it wasn't your typical indie show excuse. The Savannah Bananas had a double header literally 15 minutes down the road. 15-minute, like, at the show was supposed to start at 7. Right. There were people messaging them saying they were stuck in traffic still, and they were VIP tables. Like, they weren't like general admission, like, hey, I want tickets. These were people, like, there was a stack of tickets that the guy at the door had that were pre-sold that had not gotten there yet.
Wow.
So they did run late. It was a long show, but I had to explain to Larry was there, so I was talking to him. The venue requested that they want them there longer. Like they serve food, they serve drinks, they serve everything. So they just want them there longer. So it's one of those like, hey, just so you're aware, when you go to the Disruptor show, it could be 3 to 4 hours long if you want to sit there the entire time. Just know that going into it, and it changes everything. You know what I mean? Versus like,
right.
Like, hey, is this just a regular show? Like, no, they're specifically being asked to be there longer. And to me, that totally matters in the thing, as long as you know that up front.
Right. And that's if the venue is saying, man, you guys are doing great, we want you to stay longer, that's a good thing. That's a good sign for Disruptor. And also, it's not bad for you to have to deal with some issues like that. It kind of helps you when something happens like that that's out of your control and you got to deal with it. So kudos for them for making the change and making the most for their fans, and some good matches on that card as well.
Yeah, and I will tell you the surprise of the night. Because here's the thing, everybody's like, oh, Exotic Youth. I'm like, okay, I wasn't surprised how good Exotic Youth was. I'm fully aware of how good they are. The Voros twins, the Da Vinci twin, whatever. I mean, okay, I honestly used to figure TikTok, social media, they're gonna just not be good. Like they're you know, they weren't great, they weren't bad, they were good. I mean, they were pretty good. So that was a little surprising, but there was a lot of stuff on that card from top to bottom. You know, look, I don't know why. There's a mystery to me, and he's not on a list. I just want to say why Vari Morales doesn't get more love across the state. I have no idea. Like, in ring, 2 thumbs up. Gimmick, he's the Mexican superstar. You know, I mean, like, he is. He looks like a rock star. You know, I just don't know why. He wrestles everywhere, puts on great matches. He wrestled Caleb Conley, and they tore the house down. I mean, shocking, right?
Right.
So that's, if you want a sleeper pick for all these categories we talk about a lot, I don't know why Vari's not more out there. And oh, by the way, he only works for what we will discuss later, the biggest promotion in Georgia, you know, so.
Right. When Mark and I came to Hell Freezes Over, Mark was not familiar with any of the Georgia wrestlers. You know who stood out to him? Vari Morales.
Yeah.
Vari Morales. And Mark said, well, that guy looks like a rock star.
Yeah.
So the Mason Andrews show drew a great crowd. I'll talk a little bit more about that at another point in the show. Myron went there, said it was a great show. There's a report up from John Johnson at Georgia Wrestling History, so make sure you check that out. And just a great night of.
Let me tell you, here's this. I wanted to make sure I get this in. That's the differences in those 2 shows.
Mm-hmm.
Are everything that is right about independent wrestling. Disruptor it was the talent that's on the card, the matches that you were getting. It was a whole lot. It was, you know, and then that appreciation show was just totally driven by, you know, for a fan, you know, and it was from a fan's perspective and just the love of pro wrestling. So it was 2 different shows and both did extremely well.
Right.
Goes to a theory that I'm sure you're going to bring up later as well.
Right. Which leads us to another show from the weekend that, again, totally different. Action Wrestling at Madras Middle School, 700 plus at this middle school. Great fundraiser for the middle school. AML drew 700 in Lexington, North Carolina this weekend. Some of the matches on that action show, you had QT Marshall and Adam Priest. Are you kidding me? Sign me up for IWTV. I want to see that.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is we're going to see QT again this week. So lots of stuff going on. But like I said, Action, they have their wheelhouse. Look, they're doing things in the community. They're fundraising. But at the same time, they're also putting in, you know, their reputation is always, and I guess forever will be, bell to bell, the best wrestling around. You know, that's kind of their thing. And, you know, Matt Griffin down there just keeps chugging along and doing his thing, and he's doing it well.
Yeah. You guys, a strange night last Tuesday, went down to Canton for another Nightmare Factory showcase. What were your thoughts on that show last week?
So yeah, we talked about it a little bit on the national show because I knew it was going to be so far in between recording. It's one of those. It's kind of like it serves its purpose. It was entertaining. I saw a ton of guys I've never seen before. Mm-hmm. You know, they came through the camp and they're getting their match. They're getting to go out there and kind of. It's like getting them footage so they can send that out to promotions and say, hey, I want to come work for you. Here's kind of some of my thing. So that's what the purpose it serves. But it's also, to me, from what I could see, it looked like the coaches could get a good look at them again and say, like, look, this is what you've built for, and there's an opportunity for you. And I think it drew better than they thought it would. Because we had talked about it, and it was a cool perspective. I ended up actually ringing the bell.
Oh, wow.
And Dylan was working video, and so we were side by side, and it was great to enjoy that show from the perspective of, while the show's going on, we're just like talking. You know what I mean? It was to discuss what we were seeing, and there were even a couple times I leaned over and was like, "You should bring this guy in." Like, this, I think this, and he's like, "Oh yeah." So that's again what it does is it's an opportunity to, and no pun intended, showcase their talents, and I think it did a phenomenal job of doing that.
So here's a question: Dylan's there. Any other Georgia bookers there checking out some talent?
Nope.
It's a Tuesday night, unless you got.
I didn't see anybody. I'm not saying there were, but I didn't see anybody. Dylan's just out there running. He was running video, and so I was doing the bell. He's doing video. Had somebody running audio, and that was pretty much, and then Peter was there shooting photography, and that's kind of essentially it. Everything else was, Nightmare Crew.
Interesting. Well, there were some other great shows. Mucha Lucha once again drawing a tremendous crowd, and Gary gave some praise for that. Georgia Premier Wrestling returned in Jasper, Georgia. Palmetto Championship Wrestling, again, they run monthly there in the Columbia, Lexington, South Carolina area, and then AML was up in Lexington, North Carolina. Mucha Lucha, they only run 3 or 4 times a year, but every show they knock it out of the park.
I made sure I put a point, I let it out there as well, that, like, look, nobody. And this is kind of where it gets interesting. So here's the first one, right? Here's the first one of the show. It ain't even close. Like, anybody who's claiming they're promoter of the year in Georgia when it comes to wrestling, it's almost kind of like, you're second. You're trying to be the second best. Nobody promotes wrestling. Key phrase here. Nobody promotes wrestling like Ricardo. Nobody does what Ricardo does. Nobody's even close. Mucha Lucha just destroys, especially when it comes to gate. You can give me any, and I had this conversation with somebody about numbers recently where I'm like, I'm done having the conversation with about attendance numbers. Tell me gate and tell me profits and stuff like that. That's what I care about more than anything. And I mean, nobody comes close to Ricardo at Mucha Lucha. Nobody. Yeah. So if you want to tip your cap, if you're saying you're the best promoter in Georgia wrestling, just know you're second behind Ricardo.
He, by my estimation, by my puny math skills, he clears more in one show than some people clear in their entire careers.
Yeah. Now, in all fairness, he's also got a really heavy payroll. I mean, he does.
Right.
But he's still doing quite well, I'm sure.
Those wrestlers are getting a lot more than a hot dog and a handshake.
Yeah. And GPW, by the way, shout out to them. So at one time, previous owners, this is like the current owners are not the previous owners. They were literally the promotion fighting Southern Honor across town.
Right.
Now they've moved up to the road, and it's essentially a, they've got talents that you're not going to see, but it's got a lot of nightmare talents. So it's kind of, one of those nightmare development, territories that promotions out there. So if you're up in that corner, I've gone to a few of their shows, and I actually know some of the people that run that, and it's a great promotion, especially because it's up in that corner.
Yeah. So again, that's one we got to add to our list, which takes us to our next segment, making the drives. Where are we going to be heading, or where can you head as a wrestling fan over the next couple of weeks? We expect all these great talents to make the drives, but where can we be going? March 30th, this Saturday, Kraken Pro Wrestling in Tifton, Georgia. They've got their debut show. If you haven't watched the interview with Myron and Sam Skaggs, you need to do that. He kind of shares a little bit about the vision behind Kraken Pro Wrestling, which is it's going to be a phenomenal thing. So we really want people to go out and support that. Also, Saturday night, Georgia Championship Wrestling, featuring the old school versus a young lion, Terry Lawler versus Alexander Lev for the GCW title.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of kind of was back and forth between our table and another table across the room at Disruptor, and got to talk to Terry for a while. Talked to him for a long while after the show. Blamed him to the wife for keeping me out so late. But yeah, and it's funny when you bring up Alexander Lev. Kind of go something back to something we were talking about earlier with Anarchy. He had that match with Chip Day at Anarchy, and we were joking about the measuring stick of how good. Mm-hmm. I will say this: Alexander Lev's best match I've seen to date.
Wow,
was versus Chip Day. Not surprised considering he was in the ring with Chip Day, but and we said over the next few weeks we were going to find out a lot about some guys, and we're going to discuss one of those here shortly. But Lev now gets to go in a totally different style. Going to go do some old school and wrestle Terry Lawler. And, he'll kind of, again, see where because now you went from measuring the current measuring stick to, a living legend here in Georgia and Terry Lawler just in a matter of a couple weeks.
Right. And so Georgia Championship Wrestling, tell us where we can watch this match, and we'll put it on our YouTube channel and talk about it. But let me be the first to say I want to see it. So tell me where I can watch it. Speaking of watching, we're going to be down in Canton this Friday night, March 29th for Southern Honor. Here's a little bit more about that coming up.
Attention wrestling fans, join us Friday, March 29th for SHW 61. Live from the Action Building in Canton, Georgia. Just who are the rightful owners of the SHW Tag Team title belts? Find out once and for all when the Grapplers face Exotic Youth to officially crown the true champions. After winning the Pick Your Poison Challenge, Hollywood Hunter James has chosen the stipulation in his Jake the Snake Legacy Championship match against Chip Day. If Chip gets disqualified or uses the Brainbuster, he loses the title. It's been months of anticipation, and now the People's Captain Gunnar Miller will finally go one-on-one with the endgame CT Keys. And in our main event, Joe Black gets his shot at redemption as he challenges the Southern Honor champion Judas to a dog collar match with the title on the line. Also in action, Kyle Matthews, Alexander Lev, The Warden, Sal Renaro, AEW star QT Marshall, and more. Tickets start at just $15 and go on sale at the door the night of the show beginning at 5 p.m. Doors open at 7, bell time at 8. As always, kids 10 and under are free. Invite all your friends for another incredible night of non-stop action. Come see why we are SHW, and this is our wrestling.
It's another stacked card as always, man.
We talked about, a lot of these shows, it's a one card show, not this one. You got Chip Day and Hunter James for that Jake the Snake Legacy title. You've got the tag team titles, and then that main event, Joe Black versus Judas, dog collar match for the Southern Honor Heavyweight Championship. This is going to be, can the building contain this show? That's the question.
Yeah, it's going to be dog collar match. Somebody's getting busted open. Somebody's going to pay the ultimate price to win that title. And we talked about Chip versus Lev. Now another youngster's going to come in and test himself against Chip Day and find out where he fits on the pecking order in Georgia wrestling. So good luck, Hunter. You're going to need it, man.
And thanks to Gary Lamb for telling me that I'm welcome at his show. I appreciate that. We will be there, and I'm excited to see my first Southern Honor show. Action Wrestling is back in Fayetteville, Georgia this Friday night. Are they ever going to get some time off? I don't know. Big show, Platinum Championship Wrestling. This is the last show there in Covington, Georgia. They're supposed to make an announcement of where they're going. They've got some things in the works. We don't know. The main event, has this ever happened before? 5-on-5 on 5?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, there was a tag team Survivor Series. Remember that was like 10-on-10,
right?
But that was just two teams. This 3 thing's going to be confusing. But I've got faith in those guys. It's chaos in that building lots of times. So I don't think this is going to be any different. So
Easter weekend, you've got Classic City Wrestling there in Atlanta with some Really great matches already announced. Chip Day versus Dominic Stuckey again. Once again, Chip. It's like Chip is like getting all the young guys thrown at him. And then here's a match. I would love to see this match. Exotic Youth versus Owen Knight and Skrilla. There was a little back and forth on social media between these guys.
Yeah, Skrilla's like good about that back and forth with people online. Exotic Youth right there with them. Obviously I had a chance to see them in action versus the Voros Twins, Exotic Youth, and then obviously got the chance to talk to them after the show. They're another one, man. They're everywhere. And if in Classic City, Owen and Skrilla, Exotic Youth, I mean, are we going to see Skrilla and Owen as a team, or, that's what's the future there? Because when it comes to the actual tag team scene, I don't know that anybody's, I mean, I hate to say this, but anybody's on par right now with Exotic Youth. So
Right. And obviously next weekend is WrestleMania weekend. And so a lot of promotions taking the weekend off. Made Southern Honor move their show up a week to avoid WrestleMania. And so we'll see. But listen, no excuse, fans, whether you live in the Carolinas, Georgia, or Tennessee, there's always some exciting independent wrestling that you can go to, and you can see the Stars of Tomorrow right in your hometown. So we've been talking. We started this segment last time. Let's move on and let's talk about this week's hot hand. Oh, so, yeah, there he goes. The hot hand. Sorry, I got him out of order. So we've got 4 here for the hot hand. First one I'm going to throw out, Action Wrestling. They're going to have shows 3 straight weeks. The first one drew 700. They got the one this week. They've got a WrestleMania show up in New Jersey. They're making their SCI announcements. They are juggling a lot of things, but they are doing it all very well.
Yeah, they're on fire. Look, I mean, it's always been the good thing in my take from Matt Griffin. Eyes forward, stays focused, shuts out the noise, and just handles his business. And I think that's why Action is where it's at.
Yeah, they figured it out. Another hot hand, George's new measuring stick, Chip Day. You think about all the matches we just mentioned with him. Plus, there's been others this year already. All of these young guys, it is so awesome for these young wrestlers to get an opportunity. And Chip J is just stepping up. And it's almost like you don't even have to say it anymore. It is what it is. Chip J is George's measuring stick.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like I said, he gets on, you're like, oh, Southern Honor. Oh, he's in the mix. Oh, Anarchy. Boom, he's got a match over there. Classic City, he's wrestling Stuckey. And it's like you constantly look around and, it's just boom, boom. Oh, yeah, there's Chip. Here, Chip, there, Chip, everywhere. There's Chip. I mean, yeah.
He's the one guy, and this says a lot about Chip. He's playing the same role at all these shows, whether he's a heel or a baby face. He's at that show to be the measure stick. He's at that show for you to throw somebody in the deep end with him. And kudos to the promoters and bookers who are making that happen.
And kudos to him. This is kind of a play on what you said. Chip is Chip. He's no different. Like, it's just the fans are going to choose whether, he's fighting my guy, so I don't like him, or he's fighting a guy we don't like, we love him. Chip's authentic. Chip is Chip Day. Like, he wrestles. He's like, this is who I am. Like me or don't like me, doesn't really matter. I'm just one of the best wrestlers in Georgia, if not the, right?
That's right. Here's another guy who has come on strong. He had opportunity in Texas. He's had key matches at multiple promotions. He's getting into some new promotions. He's the Platinum Championship Wrestling Champion as they're getting ready to locate. He's kind of carrying that banner, carrying that mantle, and that's none other than Najicism.
And here's what's the thing. Whether as a heel, he surrounds himself with the stable, there. But if when he's Naja as a babyface is that Rey Mysterio babyface. He's the ultimate underdog, fighting from underneath. It's not hard for him to be in there with guys that are bigger than him. I mean, it just he's a small guy, but he's like, look, his athleticism makes up for a ton of that. And like you said, I mean, when he goes, he's not just, you know, a talent. He's also getting his fingers in other things as well, whether it's production, music, videos, and he's trying to help all these other ways. And look, if we're talking like year to day, and look, he's heavily, it's, you know, he kind of puts on the awards banquet thing. So like that kind of stuff. So he's really out there trying to do better across the day. But then, like you said, but, oh, by the way, he gets a gig out at Booker T's Texas, right. Reality wrestling. So,
and this last one may be the hottest of hands. When we talked to him and saw his body of work, someone who was working everywhere, someone who just as Chip's role he's kind of the measure stick. CB Suave seems to be a guy, everywhere he goes, he's in a title match.
Right.
I'm looking at, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, man.
I'm looking at this list, and I think it'd be good to post this list in the show notes, because it's almost overwhelming. You're like, did that I mean, just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I'll rattle some of it. Like, I mean, he's working for Mucha Lucha, Wrestle America. He was at Disruptor this past, UWF, Southern Fried. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's always against a Nick Halen, champion at the time. You know, Rico Gonzalez, who was champion at the time. Wrestle America. By the way, there's a little bit of a thing going with him and Dominic Stuckey down there where
right.
I saw him at Disruptor and he had the Wrestle America champion. I'm like, are you? He goes, I'm 9/10 of the law. I am the champion. I have the title. And I'm like, so you didn't actually, he goes, I'm the 9/10 champion. Gotcha. He's progressed in some of the tournament that they're doing over there at Disruptor. And look, I'm not throwing anything out there. Like, look, he's probably, he's closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning.
Right.
But but you wouldn't know that from watching him.
No.
He's out there. He's entertaining. He's killing it in the ring. We always tell you about, hey, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn your notifications on. I got a match from him. I'm going to be posting it this weekend. So members will get it early, and then it'll be posted onto the channel over the weekend. So it's one of the reasons why you want to be a member, either on Patreon or on YouTube, either one. But I've seen CB for a long time. And I think here's the thing I try to tell people. He is like the living proof right now of, I tell people, you don't have to go over to get over.
Right.
Because he's not winning every match.
Right.
But at the end of the match, you're like, okay, he got over without going over. So,
yeah, I was when I saw him at Disruptor there a while back, just he like stood out on the card. His look, charisma, wrestling ability. He's the total package. And again, fans, when you look at this list, it's a who's who of Georgia wrestling. He's not wrestling a bunch of slouches. Right. So just absolutely incredible, and hopefully it continues for him, and hopefully he's enjoying it and having a great time, and hopefully we can see him soon down the line. So congrats to CB Suave, one of our hot hand names there. And now the segment that we have started to love, it's this episode's Power 5. So the hot hand deals more with kind of right now. Power 5 kind of covers the whole year. And as I was working on this, we've seen some movement, shall we say.
Yeah.
And I was putting this together, and lots of movement. And everyone who's on the Power 5 has been on here before. But let's start with number 5. These guys are still hot. They're still there. It's just some other things have happened. It's Bryce Cannon and Exotic Youth. Again, they've had the hot streak. They've had the big matches Disruptor. Zach Mosley, what he's doing at Coastal Empire Wrestling, which that's one we've got to kind of pull into the fold and start reading more about and watching more about and kind of get read up on. But these guys, they continue to do good work. They continue to be somebody that's making a difference. But they're number 5 in my Power 5 now. Number 4, falling just a little bit, is Gary Lamb and Southern Honor Wrestling. Now, if you follow Gary Lamb on social media, you know, and it's out now, all of the things, legit things, like it is not a work, all of the legit things that have happened with Elevate Fight League. And what you and I have noticed behind the scenes is it has fired him up across the board.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to see the Southern Honor show this weekend. But also excited to see Southern Honor, little bit, some roster changes maybe. But seeing how they take that fire from what happened with Elevate and fueling Southern Honor with it.
Yeah. Don't let Gary not have a couple fights here in the middle, because he will be fired up and get out there, and I'm sure Southern Honor will benefit from that, to say the least. But yeah, they're always there. And sometimes, and I like to throw this in there, by the way, sometimes I always wonder, can you get used to, and I'm, you know, you get used to greatness.
Yeah.
To the point that, like, hey, look, if you see it over and over and over and over and over, and it's one, I used to say that about Barry Sanders as a running back. You know, it was after a while, it was like, yeah, Barry's great, but, you know, they don't win the Super Bowls, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but he's still, so there are some arguments for that of like, hey, do we get used to somebody being on top that we're like, well, anyway, I'm not going to say what, you know, sometimes in society we pull things down just because we've gotten used to them being on the top.
Right. Number 3 really kind of surprised me. Again, as I'm kind of putting this together and I'm looking at different things, and this one they were number 5 2 weeks ago, but they've moved up, and that's the Royston Dome. They proved this past weekend that they could pull in a larger crowd, that they could accommodate, you know, over 200 people there, which, how long has it been? Has that building ever had a show with 200 people? The partnership with Anarchy, the partnership with Georgia Outlaw Wrestling. Can those 3 promotions coexist? But to be a place where promotions wanted to go there,
right? There's
got to be something there that the owner of Anarchy, the owner of Georgia Outlaw Wrestling, like, they want a partner there. Again, can they pull it off? I don't know.
Well, look, we're going to find a little more. I don't know that if you know this, but Myron will be sitting down with Jonathan Feltner this week to discuss some of those questions and talk about, you know, the Royston Dome and SCA and everything that's going on in that building up there. So again, why should you subscribe? Why should you be a member? Because guess what, guys? Yes, it's going to be behind the paywall for a few days beforehand, right, and then it'll be out to the public. But yeah, we're going to find out some of those questions. That's kind of our goal, is like, look, we want to get right to the sources of some of these questions, you know, these answers. Right. Like, we don't want to just have it be, oh, well, this guy told me, or this guy. No, come on and explain and tell us, and we will give you an avenue to put it out there. So
I feel like things have kind of come full circle, because when Anarchy had their last show at the Landmark Arena the first time, I caught up with Jonathan there at the building, interviewed him on the Double Dropkick show. And so he was a longtime ring announcer there for Anarchy. And so I know that's a special thing for him to be able to work with them. And again, we'll see, but it's a big deal, and they're number 3 on my Power 5. Number 2, slipping just a little bit, and I'll tell why in a minute. Action Wrestling and Matt Griffin. Again, we've already talked about it on the show. They got 3 weeks in a row they're running. They're not just doing layups. Again, they drew 700 people. If you are a school in the state of Georgia, is there another promotion you're going to for a fundraiser other than Action Wrestling? No. That's who you're going to. The quality... There's been no drop off with the quality of their shows. They're bringing in new talent. the Mania Week show is going to be lots of different talent. And so Action Wrestling continues just to do really great things. And I don't even know. I don't even know if they're getting their just due in the state of Georgia. I don't know.
It's again, it always comes back to, I think that's because Matt Griffin's vision's beyond Georgia. It's not, he's not focused on Georgia. So he doesn't get, that's again what I said earlier, eyes forward, stay focused, and just keep moving and shut out the noise and just keep doing his thing.
Right. Yeah. I think what I appreciate about Matt is he has a singular vision, a singular purpose, and he doesn't deter from that.
Correct.
And he's successful in that. Number one in the Power Five. Jumped everybody. And we haven't even talked about him on this show yet because they haven't run a show in a little bit. So you're saying, Heath, how can they be the Power Five? How can IWE be number one in your Power Five? Well, let's break it down. You look about the last couple of weeks. They announced a partnership with International Wrestling Network, possible expansion overseas. They've announced shows in Lexington, North Carolina, 3 shows there. So there's a building there in Lexington where Elevation Pro Wrestling runs. And now it's kind of like the Royston Dome of North Carolina.
Right.
There are multiple promotions running there. Good venue, good place. It's set up for wrestling, so you don't have to come in and make a lot of changes. It's set up for good production. There are rumors and that we've been hearing that there's going to be a show in South Carolina. We're hearing there's going to be a show in Florida, and IWE is it's almost as if IWE has kind of like, hey, we've kind of did what we could do in Georgia, 2-time promotion of the year. Let's see what else is out there. Let's see what we can do beyond. And it's one of their mantras. They're trying to start a movement. What are your thoughts on these moves by IWE?
Time will tell. I mean, look, it's aggressive. It's they have their pluses. We could go back and forth, but they haven't done. I mean, when I see it, we'll see the execution and we'll see what happens. When you do these things, you're going to have growing pains. I mean, things happen. Obviously, we talked about with Disruptor. Hey, this stuff happens. What are you going to do? That's my biggest thing. I've learned in wrestling a lot of times is to let it play out, see what happens. It's aggressive, and I tell them the cautionary tale of be very, very cautious. North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, all running like. Here's what I had a conversation with somebody and they asked me like, oh, are they going to run their storylines? I don't know. Can you run a story in North Carolina, then back to Georgia, then to back to North Carolina? I mean, can your fan base keep up with it? Yeah, you're on a streaming service, but look, it's not the fan base. It's not all watching it on IWTV. So you can't really, or YouTube, whatever. So you're going to have to figure those things out. And I think those logistics, look, we just the thing going to the IWN, the YouTube stuff we talked about, we felt some of the growing pains at the last show for that stuff. So let it play out and see what happens. If they make contact, it could be a home run. And I always say this about wrestling and business moves, in my business world, but in wrestling specifically, make contact and see what happens. Like either you can get a home run, it could be a double play. Who knows? We'll find out. But but right now, they got a lot of, positive direction. They're making a lot of big moves. So, I get it. I got to see why they're there on your list.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm working on for our patrons, patreon.com/tappedoutpod, is a segment called Taking the Pencil, where I take, what IWE is trying to do and say, hey, how would I book this? How would I run these shows in North Carolina? What would I do in South Carolina? So if you're interested on that stuff, you need to become a Patreon and you get early access to everything. So wrapping up, we're kind of at the end of the first quarter of the year. And pull back the curtain. I was first thinking about doing a list of the champions. Like, okay, who's our top 3 wrestlers of the year so far? Top 3 female. What you would kind of expect. And I just thought, man, I kind of not feeling that. And so kind of what I landed on is a statement and a question. And the statement is this, is that a rising tide raises all ships. And we are seeing, dare I say, unprecedented success across the board in independent wrestling. There is so much independent wrestling right now, it's ridiculous.
And I want to slide in here. It starts at the top, folks. I know this isn't the national show, but it always seems to coincide when the WWE's hot and they get look they're hotter than they've been in a long time. If you watch this past week's Monday Night Raw, go back. We talked about it on the national show. I felt like one of the best Raws I've seen in years and gave every reason as to why. But they will literally get casuals back in. They will trickle down to AEW, NWA, blah, blah, blah. But guess what they also do? When they start watching WWE at home and their kids want to go see it, WWE doesn't come to town but maybe once or twice a year, if you're lucky. Find a local wrestling show, and guess what happens? People start getting just sucked back into that indie scene because their kids want to go see wrestling.
I think I said this on the last show. I was at church Sunday, and I help out with the youth group. And so one of my things is all the youth know that I host a couple of wrestling podcasts. And so this wife brings her husband up to me. He's like, hey, I wanted you to tell him about your podcast. And I start talking about independent wrestling. He has no idea.
Okay.
There are casual fans finding WWE who, if they knew there was an independent wrestling show within 20 minutes of them, they would 100% go to it. They would take their kids would get hooked. And what I would say to challenge independent wrestling, you got to figure it out. There are people out there, thousands of people in Georgia who would go to a show if they knew there was one.
Gary Lamb once told me that when you think you've promoted your event enough, keep promoting, because there are people in Canton, the town he runs, and people in the four corners of the state know Gary Lamb and Dylan, and they'll run Southern Honor in Canton. But there are people in. I had a friend of mine. You ready for this? Who used to be an independent wrestler 15 years ago. Did not know Southern Honor ran in Canton. He lives in Canton.
Wow.
So think about that.
And we would consider Gary's one of the best.
Yeah. So there are a ton of casual fans, as you put it out there, that just don't know that your independent promotion is running. I'm a big fan of marketing on the internet or whatever and all that kind of stuff. And I used to kind of, I'm trying to think of how I say this. I thought, papering the town as far as putting the posters up in the shopping mart and the gas stations and stuff like that. I used to be like, those days have come and gone. Clearly, I don't think they are.
Right.
Like
we just had a Tough Man contest, 2-night event in Pickens, not far from me, at the market at the mill, and we've run wrestling there before. I saw posters everywhere. I saw more posters for this event around town than I've seen for anything. 2 nights, they filled that place up. Hundreds and hundreds of people. The venue got behind it. It's like an indoor flea market. All the vendors were open. And they're already like, when can we get an event like this again? And I really think between radio, posters, social media, it was everywhere. And somehow we're missing these wrestling fans. I mean, I talk about independent wrestling with people all the time. They just don't know about it. That leads me to my next thing. Everybody's running at a high level right now. Who is going to be the first to overreach, to expand too soon, to have a misstep? Like, who's the promotion that's running so smoothly now, doing so well now, that when we get to the end of the year, they're not even around anymore? Because we've seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the question that I have.
sometimes it's the right. I was going to say the right person leaves, but it actually would be the wrong person leaves.
Right.
And it could be a talent. It could be a booker. It could be a promoter. It could be, a million reasons. Companies lose their building. There's always stuff that, especially in indie wrestling, that happened that you didn't even see coming. That's the end. Here's the thing. It may not be they're out of business or whatever, but you start to see well, the train hadn't hit yet, but I see it coming, that kind of thing, and that can happen. So I think that's it's a tough one. I mean, and look, and I'm not. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna hold that for later. But you can just be careful and keep your eye on the ball. And we talked about Matt Griffin. That's what he does well, is keep your eye on the ball and keep focused. And or the next thing, it's tough. It's really tough.
Right. And so those are just the things, those are the things I'm watching. Who is the talent? Is there a talent that's doing well that's going to get too big for their britches? And maybe behind the scenes, they start rubbing people the wrong way. And all of a sudden, you're not getting the same bookings anymore. We talked a little bit about this. There are things happening in major nationwide promotions that could open up the doors for more of their talents to be on these weekend shows.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a local guy, you're going to lose your spot. So there's a lot of things happening. It's an exciting time. It was an exciting enough time for independent wrestling that we started this show this year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know what you got. I do want to throw out, listen, there's no good way to segue it, because it's just something you said that made me think of it, about things happen we don't see coming. Look, I want to give a shout out to Curtis Coleman. Look, injury suffered. He had to walk away. He was in the best shape of his life. He was on a hell of a run. Had a UK trip coming. I mean, just everything was starting to click for him.
Right.
He made that announcement on social media, and it's just, it just was a crazy, like you said, because we were talking about, you don't see things coming.
Right.
Sometimes things just happen, and this is one of those scenarios that I hate it. We had just gotten really watching his stuff and really getting in, and it was heartbreaking, man. It's just heartbreaking to see it happen right now.
And he's in a spot where his son has started wrestling, and it's a very sad thing. And I'm grateful that they were able to catch this injury before he did, had a permanent life-altering injury. Curtis was one of those guys. He was starting to get in a lot of places. He was starting to get in places in South Carolina, multiple places in Georgia, and was really, we talked to him at UWF, was really getting ready for a strong run. And it's just really unfortunate. And I echo all your sentiments. And now, okay, and who is going to step up? Who is going to step up and be that guy now? Maybe it's his son. His son's a tremendous athlete. We'll see.
Yeah, that's big shoes to fill, and people they may underestimate the shoes that, the void that's going to be there with Curtis Coleman out. But it's bigger shoes than I think a lot of people are going to, probably recognize until time will show it. And then they'll go, oh yeah. Cause I mean, the development he was giving talents at some of these places, that's, he's going to be able to stand there and teach, but it's another thing to get in there with them and kind of show them. So yeah. But yeah. And you brought it up. Look, there's a small indie note. I wanted to throw this in. I know we're running long, but it's something I had a conversation with somebody this past weekend about, that people don't even think about that it affects indie wrestling. Impact rumors are they may go live every Thursday.
Right.
If they go Thursdays, that means all of their talents are going to be freed up to do weekend shows at indie, do indie spots, which now they sometimes have to give up because they got to go do tapings and pay-per-views and stuff like that. But if they go to every, Thursday live, people are like, well, that'll be inconvenient. They're not taping blocks. especially if it's in Orlando, by the way. $20 Spirit flight from Atlanta to Orlando.
Wow.
Go down there, film, and then I would just jump back on a red eye and fly back home and, be done. So, again, goes back to things on the national scene that may free it up. Just saying.
And Alan Angels, who was in town this weekend, he would be on even more Georgia shows. And if you're an Impact talent, to think, oh man, I can get a booking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's not bad. It's not bad work if you can get it. Well, fans, thanks again. I have thoroughly enjoyed doing this show. If you've got questions, send them to tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Don't forget, YouTube is where you can find everything. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. I'm still learning to hit the bell, hit those notifications so you're finding out when stuff's happening. All the podcast apps. Listen, you can find us everywhere. And the best thing you can do is share us on social media. Tell a friend. Tell one of these wrestlers, hey, these guys were talking about you, and they were actually pretty nice this time. But we appreciate all your support. And if we're at one of these shows, come up and talk to us. We would love to talk with you and hear what you think about the show and hear who you think the hot hand should be. So for Nick McDaniel, I'm Heath Mulligan. And for the Tapped In Indie Wrestling Podcast, we'll see you next time.